Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. It's Lisa Jones, your host, and today I have with me Curtis Childs. I met Curtis at the IONS conference, and oh my gosh, this is going to blow your mind what we're going to talk about today, because this is something I had never heard of before, which is called the Swedenborg Foundation, and all of this stuff about this guy named Swedenborg that I had no idea. And I have to say I'm quite proud, because being from Sweden, my original roots, I feel like somehow I have some sort of claim to this whole situation. So let me just tell you that Curtis is interested in improving life by finding new ways to think about it. He is the director of Off the Left Eye, a media project of the nonprofit Swedenborg Foundation that looks to explore and explain a truly comprehensive theory of everything without taking itself too seriously. So welcome, Curtis.
Thank you. I really appreciate getting the chance to talk with you. My grandfather was Swedish as well. So yeah.
Fabulous.
Okay, cool. Maybe somehow I contributed to this in some way, but I
Oh,
really.
absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so, like I was saying, I mean, truly, your presentation caught my eye. I mean, it was one of the more different ones that they were doing at the conference. So many of them are people's actual experiences, which is so cool. But I just love that there's this whole body of work out there, really genius work. I mean, I've been watching some of your YouTubes and everything, and my mind is just being blown open right now. And what I love is that you say, what happened to this guy? Because, you know, he was up there inventing things and doing things, you know, like all the greats that we've always heard about, but then he just disappeared. And so go ahead and you can tell the listeners what you think happened.
Yeah, well, and I think that it's good for me to hear that you felt like my presentation regarding Swedenborg kind of stuff could add something to the near-death experience conference. And I think that that's part of what that motivates me to be on this mission, to tell everyone about Swedenborg and what he was all about and the things discovered, because I think it does add some pieces or connective tissue between the different things, like experiences people have, religious institutions, the way society and science and technology are now working. I find Swedenborg is this amazing sort of matrix at the heart of all that, and I think can really be useful to letting these things talk to each other in a way.
I love it.
Within what he has, you have a way that actually the world of let's say the near-death experience community, and then let's say Christianity, like these two things that don't seem like they always get along. There's times when they do, but there's times when they definitely don't. But yet Swedenborg has this amazing matrix that they can both fit into cleanly, and you can understand why each one is what it is. But then even to all kinds of religious traditions, but also life experience. And what to me has the greatest connection that he's given me is the stuff that I do day to day and the way that I feel moment to moment, the little stuff that actually makes up a lot of our life experience. I get how that is sort of the end result and fits in with this bigger spiritual picture. Because even if it's like, we had this amazing experience, but then what for the rest of life, to me, he's unlocking that. So the guy himself, he was, and if he hadn't had this sort of spiritual awakening in his mid-50s, I wouldn't really care about him. I mean, you've got these guys from that same time period, Kant and those kind of guys. I never studied them. I don't care. But he was, he was doing good things for the human race, right? He was figuring out how to do things more efficiently, studying a lot of anatomy and trying to make good discoveries there. Actually, some of his stuff that he never published but had just written, journaled privately, way went out ahead of what was known at the time about the hemispheres, right and left. He had sort of anticipated modern science, but he didn't really get famous for that. He didn't publish it. It was good stuff, but it wasn't. We've moved on from it since then. But what we haven't moved on from is what happened when you got this guy who is really a genius and has this super trained analytical mind, getting to suddenly access what do we call it, the spiritual world or beyond the veil or something, access that regularly at will and in an organized fashion, and that he spent the last half of his life or closing in on it, rigidly, carefully documenting everything, and not just from an explorer. He he had like a backstage pass. Like there was, he was on a mission, you know, and I don't think the mission was from him. I think this was like, hey, the spiritual is reaching out and going to give us tools to understand everything. So to me, Swedenborg is this, he's a guy, sure, but once you get into the information there, this is describing a huge piece of our life that we have very little information on. So it ties all that together. And I've just seen it. The reason why we keep doing it on YouTube, because why would you want to go talk about Swedenborg on YouTube? Nobody's asking for that, right? I mean, it's, and people are going to think it's weird, but I've seen it change people's lives and very quickly go from what's this strange thing to this is what helped me get through whatever horrific thing I'm facing in my life. So to me, it's become even more of this personal mission of there's medicine here that was really helpful to me, and I'm going to work with this awesome team that I'm with to make this accessible to everyone who uses it in whatever way is going to help the world they're in. So that's the intro to Swedenborg.
Yeah, that is so cool. And so I'm curious, like, how did this Swedenborg Foundation even come to fruition? I was thinking, like, where's the money behind this? Because obviously you guys have a great team and right. You're getting the word out there. So like, what?
Yeah. So Swedenborg, the nature of Swedenborg's message is, so for those who aren't familiar at all, this is, when I say start to access a spiritual will, I'd say what you now call an out-of-body experience. Not quite a near-death experience, although he does describe being shown what it's like to die. But it wasn't triggered by some kind of danger that he was in. This would be like the other spiritual transformative experience, shared death experiences, those sorts of things. But so he could started to do those at first. He didn't have much control, but then it became constant, all day, every day. So he was in there and doing that. And then, from that was able to create this series of like 15 really in-depth books about what's missing in our picture of reality, and there is where we begin kind of putting it together and telling the world about it. So Swedenborg Foundation, that picture of life has moved a lot of people really deeply in the years since he died. He didn't leave any kind of legacy of a group that he started or anything. He just had books, right? But very shortly after he died, and even some while he was alive, people found this and felt like there's something here. And the way that it particularly moves people when they start to get into it, it becomes something that's a foundation of how you look at life from there on out. So from that, people have started to form like reading groups and churches and all kinds of things to figure out how do you take this big complex thing that we feel like has all this value and put them into life. And one of those things was the Swedenborg Foundation, which is old. It is like 170 years old. And for most of its life was just to keep his books in print, because he was, I think, on track to be like maybe Newton is a little high, but someone up there that you would just know from your history books or whatever, that would probably have his books reprinted and all that. But he got a little weird and a little spiritual, so that may have made it so that nobody's really making sure these things subsist. So you had Swedenborg Foundation, like, all right, we'll keep printing these, and then throughout the years, people have contributed to that. And it's a nonprofit, so it's not like making money off the sales of Swedenborg's books. And not that many people want to buy the books anyway, at least, and definitely not until recently. We've had this kind of explosion of interest as we've started these online programs, which I think is for a few reasons. I think it's like the internet is the best tool you could possibly imagine for trying to talk about spiritual ideas. I know you're finding this, you're doing this show here, that to be able to have an independent message that you can reach directly to people and be able to find the people that are interested in. It's the coolest. I mean, isn't it the greatest era to be doing anything?
It absolutely is. And I love it. Tell the story about how you started. You were just going to do like a little, was it a YouTube or something?
Yeah,
and then and it kept.
So everything that I've done that's gone well has been sort of not what I thought would do well. Like it's definitely been, things are working out well, but I was around, but I didn't have that idea. And the way that it started with Swedenborg Foundation was I was helping them do a little page on Facebook to try to try to do what we're doing right now. which is to bridge the near-death experience world and Swedenborg world, because those two worlds should be much better acquainted than they are. I mean, even Raymond Moody, who made up the term near-death experience, he had a whole section about Swedenborg and his Life After Life, like the book that started it all. So I was like, hey, I'm going to just get a few people to realize that this is important. And well, maybe some people will buy the book or something. But from there, it's like, as you know, everybody wants to talk about spiritual experiences, and there's not a lot of venues to do it. So right away, just all these people started rushing in and talking and liking things. And so we ended up with this thing that was getting really popular. And from there, we're like, all right, well, let's answer more questions more effectively. Let's start doing video. And it just blew up from there.
Wow. Yeah, that is so cool. I remember you said you put it on and then like immediately you had 3 likes or something. And then you're like, oh, that's weird. And then like, you refreshed it or something, you checked it like 10 minutes later and all of a sudden there was, it just boom, boom, boom. It just suddenly was like a mushroom growing.
That's right. And I didn't know that much about doing stuff on Facebook or even YouTube. I wasn't somebody who was all social media gung-ho, but this is where the action is. So
That's
I got
right.
into it.
Well, I'm curious. So how did you specifically fall across or, trip across Swedenborg in your life? How did it?
Yeah. Well, I didn't trip across anything. I mean, Swedenborg has been the house I've been living in. I mean, my parents were readers of Swedenborg. So I can't say like I discovered this and it changed my life. However, not everybody gets into what their parents have been into,
Right.
For me, I discovered it when I began to need help and found that it could actually help, because it just seemed like this obscure philosophical, religious kind of stuff. But there was a point at which I realized, oh, no, this is telling you about what's going on in your mind right now. And this is giving you the tools to navigate the web of consciousness. They're not obvious at first, but as you start to dig into how the whole thing is structured, oh, this is like, weapons grade information here about how life is. And really, the truth sets you free. The more you learn about how life is, to me, the more things that seem like this like thicket I could never get out of in my mind become, oh no, I can tell what that is. I can tell what that is. And I know how to, feed certain things and not feed other things. And from there, it took off for me. So I've always kind of had it around, but also this like online phase has been a new thing for me, because Swedenborg struggles to gain anyone's attention. It's had sort of its ups and downs, but remains like a very small niche sort of thing compared to where I think it should be for its usefulness. So I wasn't sure, is anybody else going to like this? Is it a hobby? Is it something I'm familiar with? And that's why it seems so great and valuable and helpful to me. It's just because I'm habituated to it and I don't have barriers. So to get to go on the internet and other places now and start to talk about it and have people respond so deeply and so quickly, this is like a new life for me, because now I'm like, I knew it was good. I knew it could do something. And now I know I'm not just like building myself a little castle, that this is something that public access to it is going to enhance where people are or give them a new place to start.
I love that. That's so awesome. Yeah, because for me, I can specifically say the day that I heard your speech was the first time, I'd heard Swedenborg said out loud. So
yeah.
So I know exactly the time that I stumbled across it.
Yeah, and it's a tough conversation to start, because Swedenborg is just like, it's a weird sounding name.
Right.
It's an old, who cares about something from the 1700s? And on top of that, he's talking about spirits and
right.
God at the same time, and life after death and philosophical stuff. But this whole thing exists to be like, wait, here, it's worth it anyway.
It is. Well, as you were talking, I almost feel like it's almost like he's unlocked the matrix or something. You know what I mean? Because
right.
He totally, like you were saying, it's like he's got all these ways of getting through that thicket of, where we're just blinded by all of this stuff that's happening in our life. And yet if you dissect it and take it apart, you can easily navigate your way through, which I just think is so cool.
Yeah, think about if all it is getting clear view on what's going on the level lets you navigate. And think about if somebody was completely naive to the physical world that we live in right now, and say they just dropped onto the planet, and let's say they had like a computer or something, they're going to get scammed by everybody. I get like 3 calls a day on my phone that I know I don't pick this up. right? But somebody brand new is like, oh, someone's calling me. And I just had this voicemail like 3 times yesterday. That's this computer generated voice. Like, somebody is using your social security number at the southern border. Press 1 to talk. Of course, that's junk. But if I didn't know what robocalls were, if I didn't know the nature of the human race and that some people are trying to scam the system, I would fall for that. I wouldn't know how to cross the street. I just wouldn't know how to do anything. And really, like, that's how I am about the spiritual side of life, which is like the psychological side. I get some thoughts and feelings, and I don't know how to look critically at it. I don't know how to pick it apart. So just being able, if somebody could just come into this world and say, this physical world, and say, look, this is how this works. This is how political campaigns are trying to get you to do this. This is how advertisements are trying to get you to do this. A little street smarts. That's what Swedenborg is doing on the spiritual level, is to be able to say, guess what? The reason why we're experiencing stuff day to day that we are, you can trace it back to these spiritual sources, just like the reason we have the physical things around us, you can trace it back to these sources. So to me, that's what it offers.
Yeah, wow, that is so cool. And I love your website is super easy to navigate, and it has like, where to start, because that's, as soon as I went there, I'm just like, oh my God, where do I go? And you right up front, it says, go here to start. And there's a great about 8-minute video, which just really is a great summary. And then you can go deeper from there. And I just wanted to, I took a screenshot of this one, let's see, I guess it was about when he went to the afterlife. So basically, like you said, in his mid-50s, he had an out-of-body experience and started then at will being able to go to the other side, right?
Yes. That's
and
right.
Then started documenting that and started talking about it, which, I mean, again, is so fascinating. I mean, this is like what all of us in the near-death community, I think, has been trying to, it's like justify, like, because again, most people, or a lot of people I know, they've been told they're crazy for thinking these things or saying these things out loud. So I just love. And so anyway, I took this screenshot because this is exactly what I experienced on the night that I had the shared death experience. I left my body, went to the other side. And so let me just read what he says here.
Sure.
As soon as we arrive in the other life, we are all recognized by our friends and relatives and by people we have known in one way or another. Further, we talk with each other and continue to see each other in keeping with our friendship in the world. I have heard many people who had just come from the world overjoyed to see their friends again, and their friends overjoyed that they had arrived. It often happens that married partners meet and welcome each other joyfully. And I just was like, as that was being read on the screen or whatever, I was just, my mind was being blown, because that was the scene I got to see, where I was brought to this area. It was like a reception room, and all of these beings were coming together. And there was an announcement. My husband's name was Ian Sharp. So the Grand Mr. Ian Sharp is about to arrive. And everybody was just, oh my God, he's coming. And the anticipation was palpable. The love was just overflowing. And as I mentioned, I mean, again, he talks about colors that aren't, that we don't have, which is what I experienced. And wow, it was just, so I feel like, oh my God, I'm being confirmed by somebody from, the 1700s.
That's awesome. Well, and and something that's cool for me is what the part of what I see the harmony is between the near-death experience and the Swedenborg is that near-death experiences bring it to life in a certain way, because Swedenborg is writing about it and he'll give you data points and he tries to describe it well. And I had a phase of really reading a ton of near-death experiences, and what they give plenty of information that Swedenborg doesn't have as well, but really lets you understand the emotional impact and the vibrancy and the love in those situations. So I find that they can each lend each other things. And so just getting to hear about that from you, I mean, I never thought about that. Oh yeah, they're announcing that you're there, and you get the modern, clear, emotional picture of it. And I think what Swedenborg can do for everybody, like you're saying, is you mentioned people say, oh, you're crazy for reporting something like that. Well, the thing that really makes people, I think, feel like things are crazy is if they don't see a structure that would lead to that event happening. Again, the example, if I just popped into this world here. And I said, wow. I went and saw, it was like a room, and this guy was there, and there was lights pointed at him, and somebody else was like flat on a little screen. And well, why? I mean, there's no reason that the world would act like that. But if they knew the structure behind it, if they understood the internet and they understood cameras and lighting, they would know why it's there. And that Swedenborg, when somebody reports something like, here's all these people were gathered for this one person's arrival, well, Swedenborg could give the principle that in the spiritual world, love brings about conjunction or distance is created by similarity or dissimilarity in affection. So when somebody you love is showing up, that naturally is going to pull you to wherever they are. He can give you sort of the permanent principles that create some of the experiences people have, because we've looked around at this physical world and we know it operates by enduring principles. We know that gravity is the same everywhere, and we know that physics and whatever else so you get some peek into what are the equivalents of those in the spiritual world. And then these awesome stories people tell don't just seem like fanciful in a vacuum, but it's like, oh no, that they fit into this larger structure, which some people don't need any convincing at all. But for some, that can make a big difference to them, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that to me is the convincing, because the fact that he was a scientist as well, you know, and I mean, he was that materialist realist, I think, before he had this awakening, you know, I would assume. I haven't done that much research yet, but for so many people I know that are materialist realists. Oh, by the way, that's my dog, everybody.
Hey,
my dog just came to Maui with me. Dog. Tux. Quiet. This is going to be a new experience on the podcast with the dog here,
right?
But
New co-host.
That's right, new co-host. If I could reach down and get him, I would, but the way my setup today is not so easy. So yeah, just the fact that like he had, you know, I think maybe it opened his mind. I don't know. I mean, you know, his earlier writings before the awakening, but I mean, is it mainly focused on the after awakening part, you know, the foundation, or what you all talk about?
So, what I talk about, like I said, I have very limited interest in Swedenborg's life before that, because I know some of it, and he was cool and doing good things, but that's not my passion. Is, as you read that little description of me, like, how can we make life better? Yeah. And the insights he has into the physical stuff before have limited ability to do that, but the spiritual stuff has a great ability. All his earlier stuff, he wasn't writing theological stuff, he was writing scientific stuff. So even though he had, like, his dad was a bishop in the church, so he had a lot of religious connect. I wouldn't say he was like, you know, a hardcore atheist trying to tear down religion, as a lot of people in that time were. This sort of enlightenment, and that was really coming up. But that wasn't what he was writing or doing. This process that he went through shifted. You know, before he was writing anatomy and how to mining and economy and all those sorts of things. So, but the cool thing is, he didn't say, you know, what a waste of time my previous life was. I was learning all this physical stuff, but now I just can sit on a rock on top of a mountain, and that's what life is actually all about. It's this marriage of everything that he learned actually was the foundation on which he could build this other stuff. I don't think you could have had somebody without that prior knowledge accept the kind of information or put together the package that he put together, because you know, all of his stuff about anatomy and the human body, that works into all of his works. Actually, he talks about the whole spiritual reality sort of in relation to the human body, and how, just like you can have here, that the body is this perfect picture of interdependent, cooperative, loving community, because you have all these little cells that are working together for the good of the whole and getting everything from the whole. That is like a picture of heaven, not necessarily the shape of it, but the functions in it are. And so that was useful to him. But everything he learned about, like, botany and chemistry and geology, those were informing sort of, he had to have that foundation. And that gets back to, like, why have the physical anyway? If it's all about the spiritual and the physical is nothing. No, it's important that, just like you got to have a foundation on a house. So to him, it was like, this was the next step. Like, he saw all this earlier stuff as really preparation, just like we all go through. It wouldn't be like, let's all pull the kids out of school and just teach them about life after death. You know, the foundation of learning about the world beyond just living in it, those are the concepts. Those concepts we learn about physical things are sort of like the building blocks for how to put together an idea about spiritual things, you know?
Right. Wow, that is so cool. I know his most popular book is Heaven and Hell. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So what do you think? What about that book is what makes it the most popular?
Because basically he was starting writing this really technical, drawn out description where he was trying to go through and explain all this hard to explain stuff, and everyone just, once people learned, initially he was publishing anonymously, so nobody knew, oh, this is Swedenborg, the scientist, putting out these books. But eventually people found out that it was him. There's some anecdotes that he was able to know things he shouldn't have known, and that impressed some of the royalty in Sweden, or I mean in Europe at the time. But eventually it came out that it was him, and everybody, he wasn't selling any of these books. Like, nobody was interested in these big long things, which is why my job on YouTube is still difficult, you know. But people were saying, well, just tell us what you could see the dead, you can talk to the tell us about that, tell us about that. And so he wrote Heaven and Hell basically to do that and use as a funnel into the rest of his work, because he was saying, look, there's stuff you need. It doesn't seem exciting, but you need this. So he would have these chapters about what the afterlife is like, and at the end he has all these references back to his previous work, Secrets of Heaven. So it's most popular because people want to know about life after death. Our most popular videos on YouTube by far are the ones about life after death. This is something that concerns everybody. But the cool thing is, Swedenborg, the world he presents, just like the physical world here, is so interconnected that everything you learn about life after death is teaching you about other things like personal growth, or ethics, or what's the point of life, or the nature of the divine. It's too intertwined. Like, if you really got to study anything seriously physically, if you say, all I want to study is birds, well, okay, but you're going to eventually have to learn a little bit about aerodynamics and lift, right? You're going to have to learn a little bit about ecosystems as a whole and where a bird fits into that. You just can't escape that one thing depends on another. And so it is with Swedenborg. And this is actually why, so we'll go into why I find such a satisfying experience going in and interacting with the material, because you get, no matter where you are in it, you get this sense of the bigger picture. We'll have people that say, like, hey, I put your stuff on when I'm going to sleep, which could be seen as like, yeah, I guess it is a little boring. But actually what I think it is there's a trust in the brand, which is that I know whatever you're saying here is part of a larger picture that I like. And it has the spirit, it's like hologram, like it has the spirit of the whole in the part. And that's how I feel getting into Swedenborg's works. I mean, there's not every single word of every part. There's some issues in it, but like, in general, when you get in there, he's talking about something, it's from the same perspective. Like, the reason we're talking about this is, the betterment of the human race, and lifting you out of what's negative into what's positive. It's there in those things. So that you got Heaven and Hell, which is, sure, it's about the sort of observational stuff that he sees, but in there you've got why stuff is like that, and it works back into how to best live your life and all this sort of stuff. So it's all everywhere. But Heaven and Hell is popular because it's sensational stuff,
Right. Wow, that's fantastic. And I just love it because, like you said, I mean, that for me personally, having my out of body experience, the shared death experience, I mean, it really woke me up to life. And I feel like, this book, Heaven and Hell, I mean, it answers a lot of questions that people are looking for to understand maybe more what is after this life. And by being woken up to life, I feel like now that I'm not afraid of death, I can live life here much more fully, and I'm hoping that that's the case for people listening to this podcast or learning more about Swedenborg, is that when you understand more in depth about the afterlife, then you're more comfortable, and it's not this thing that people fear and kind of live their whole life in, with the brakes on, like, oh, I'm so afraid.
Well, it's a great purpose. And I think it does that, because knowing about the process does change our experience of this current part that we're in. I think about, I like to make the comparison to exercise, and the difference between the pain of exercise and unknown body pain of unknown origin, even if it's a little less painful than like powering through the last part of your run, they're way different, because in the run, not only do you know what's happening, that nothing's really wrong, but also you get why you're doing it, that it's leading to you to something good, and you've even been through that cycle before. So I do think that we recently had somebody who it was saying that the descriptions that they were able to get of afterlife from Swedenborg, they had just lost their husband, and were able to say, well, picturing us doing these particular things together, that helped bring about some kind of, you never say you're fully healed from something like that, but that helped them receive some measure of comfort. And I think it's because, even though, like, if you just think about how our life extends in front of us and we imagine it, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know sort of the parameters on what's going to happen. And we can even if I picture, oh yeah, I'm going to go to college here and then get this kind of job, and I go forward with that. Even if that doesn't happen, in the meantime, that placeholder let me know there's something is coming, and I think when our horizon stops so abruptly at death, then it can be disconcerting for the person. But then when somebody that you love dies, and suddenly you don't even know what am I experiencing? Am I experiencing is that the last time I ever see them? And not only that, do they not even exist anymore? Like, is that the end of this, which we can inherently feel, that it makes no sense that a person could have an end. If you think about, like, what makes a person, no way. There's a part of the heart that just gets that, no, that doesn't add up, that this person
Right.
can just, no, people are eternal. Like, but to not have the picture of that happening can create this dissonance. And we don't know. Yeah. But then not even knowing, well, they exist, but are they just kind of like part of the cosmos now? But to have the picture like you describe of, here comes my husband, is coming in, they're announcing his name, people still love each other, we still interact, this is the way. Now suddenly I'm no longer, my track that I'm living on doesn't stop there. It's like, okay, whatever that is, I know the ballpark.
That's right. Well, yeah, it's like a continue. Is that the
Yeah.
word?
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, because you're right. The whole idea of just that stop, that abrupt stop, is just, it's terrifying to think, oh, you just fall off a cliff and just disappear into the ether. So
Yeah.
it's just nice to have this documentation, and especially the breadth and width of his information is astounding, and I can't wait to dig more deeply into it. Well, you know what? Let me pull some cards. I just want to see what Spirit has to say. Maybe we've got a little message from Swedenborg himself.
Great.
That'd be pretty cool, right?
Yeah, maybe he'll say, like, stop getting it wrong. You're misrepresenting my stuff. I never know. Yeah, I wonder if he knew about what we were doing, whether he'd be all about it or not. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think he has a hand in that.
Sure.
All right. So the first card, which is always the blockage card, is truth. And
Okay.
so what I'm getting is that, in general, like, people don't know the truth. It's like, that's where people are blocked. People think they know the truth, but that's what we're seeking, right? Is the truth.
Yes.
So the second card is the action card, which is light. And I just love this, because actually I feel like the divine message I was given when I went to the other side is, I'm here to shine light on death. And so I feel like that's what I'm doing today, and, talking to people about that. And it's about shining light on the truth. And that's what the foundation is doing. That's what you're doing.
Right.
And especially with just now with the internet and this amazing way to be able to get out to people, it's how amazing that you can shine more light on this amazing topic, and that people are much more open to it now. Yeah. And the ultimate outcome is faith, which, I think that's the other part of it, is that once you're exposed to the truth and you've seen the light, well, then it's just a matter of believing and, going all in. And I know for me, the more I believe, the more miraculous, amazing. I'd love to know if Swedenborg can explain, like, why all these amazing coincidences happens. Like, I'll be talking about my mom, and a red cardinal is always what I see when I think about my mom, and then, and then boom, a red cardinal shows up. So is it just a coincidence? Is it
right?
like, curious.
Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts on those cards.
Yes.
First of all, something that's cool is you're talking about truth and then light. And I talked about some broad principles in the spiritual world. There's this concept Swedenborg has of what he calls correspondences. And this is essentially how the spiritual side of life and the physical side of life interact. So a correspondence is sort of a representation of spiritual things in physical things. And a great example of that is the correspondence for light is truth. So you think about what light does in the physical world. Right now, we both have light on us, because if we didn't, we wouldn't know what each other were doing, or what we looked like, or whatever. So the physical world, light lets you see where you're going. It allows plants to photosynthesize. Everything that light does physically, truth does for the spirit. So if you think about how we say, like, oh, I see, when we understand something, that's because that's the truth allows the spirit to understand. And Swedenborg says that goes down even into detail, that the things that light does spiritually, the truth does spiritually, light does physically. And if we're talking about, a red cardinal, he describes this sort of thing happening in layers in the spiritual world. So he'll say everything has layers there, and it has to do with just like you'd find in a lake, there's sort of there's striation or whatever that is of different bands of temperature. In the water, in the atmosphere, you have these different zones because the amount of the gases in there, the density, whatever, change as you go up. There are different layers in the Earth's mantle. That's just how matter behaves. And so spiritually, there are these layers too. But spiritual, everything has to do with the heart and mind. So there, it's like the more your mind opens, the more you can go up these levels. So he talks about, like, he'll say, oh, angels, which is what he calls people who are, going on a good path. You'll have angels in a higher level talking about something. And as they do it, birds and things appear on the lower level because there's a correspondence there. And he doesn't really talk much about if there's a direct, like, could there be, like you said, that was your mom, like if somehow there's a connection, like the spirit in you is focused on her, and somehow that kind of, get some kind of correspondence on the physical. I don't know, but that would seem like the sort of thing that could be in the system. So yeah, there's many things that I feel like I don't have the pieces on, but I could certainly see how there's so many people report, like, oh, this thing happened just when I needed it. That he says providence is in every detail. So it could well be that there's some mechanism there doing that.
Wow, that's so cool. I love that the truth and the light came together. That's so cool. And then the faith part, I mean, do you feel like?
Sure. So Swedenborg has he has a couple of definitions for faith, but the one that I really like is he talks about faith being the affection for truth. That faith is like when you don't just see the truth, but you love it and do it. So that, because that, and you can use faith as like trusting in something, which I would say like a measure of trust. If you really believe that, the right thing is to be nice to people, because that's the golden rule, right? So faith in that is like, you love that and you go do it. Even sometimes when there's some cost to you, you say, I trust that this really is the right thing, and that life is structured so that living by this is a good plan. Then that's like, acting on your faith there.
Wow, that is so awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation. And before we start, we both talked about we've got Swedish roots, so we feel like somehow we've got something to do with
yeah, I'll take credit
Swedenborg. For that. Yeah, exactly. Me too. I'll take credit. Well, so how can people find you? Go ahead, and I will have all the links below this, but sure, you can go ahead and.
Yeah, we're really centered on YouTube. The Off the Left Eye is this primarily a YouTube channel. So the best way is youtube.com/Off the Left Eye. If you go on YouTube and search Swedenborg, you'll find us very quickly. There's not a huge ecosystem of people making Swedenborg videos, but that's sort of the heart of what we're doing. So I'd say go there, and then there should be links to take you everywhere from there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Curtis. It's been so much fun talking with you, and I'm super excited to dive deeper, and maybe down the road we can have another conversation.
I would love to. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.